live video, and I hope that some people will check this out. I'm actually doing this video while training. A lot of people would say I'm trying to think. Sometimes when we misspeak a lot in English, and so like when a person says that they're training for something, if you're just exercising isn't the same thing as training. So normally, like I think training is for like a for an objective. But a deep thing I learned is I learned from the YouTube. I learned there's some people. I don't know if this YouTube shows access to who I'm subscribed to, but I found some epic YouTubers over the years, and there are YouTubers that can change your life, but in a matter of like one video they can say something you hadn't come across, and that doesn't actually exist in the modern like lexicon. That's some real privy information. And so one of them, there's a person named the Game Spitter that I reference a lot and I've learned a lot from, and he would talk about how in real life you're given a test before you're given the lesson, but you're given the training materials or materials to work with before you're given the test. So that's the way that I appreciate life. So it's not. So I think that's to add on and to piggyback on the commentary of the Game Spitter. Where shout out to anyone who just joined the chat. I just saw someone checked out the chat or the video, and I just wanted to keep riffing. And I'm using these videos as a live because it spends less bandwidth. But I'm just riffing on. So you had like the Game Spitter. He came out. He's had different prolific videos and is a prolific content creator on topical issues. But he said that life will throw a test at you before you learn the lesson from that test, and the lesson is actually having survived it. You can make sense out of it, but life actually doesn't make sense. But challenging oneself makes sense. Inspiration makes sense. Creativity makes sense. But life in itself doesn't make sense, and I think that might have to do with the way that life is not as linear as we would have it. And that's both that's I think the way that we would think life to be linear and that it's not linear is some of our protection and our blessings and what make life worthwhile, but also daunting and a paradox. And life is a paradox because I've spoken. I'm now at 800 videos. Some of the YouTubers I reference, I now have more actual videos in those two long form than these YouTubers. But that's not that I'm more prolific than anyone, but I have 800 videos where I'm gone until I'm near about. Like some people might appreciate me as like light skin, but I've gone until I'm blue in the face saying that time may not be linear as we think. But I think that a better way to say, I wanted to talk a little bit about time and temperature as being different than we normally think of. But to go off of the Game Spitters, that he has said that life will throw a test at you before you had a chance to understand the lesson that would be part of the test. But just challenging yourself, listening to your instincts, going with your inspiration, that will have you ready for a test. It's kind of like if you have a teacher, the teacher introduced you the first day, the teacher introduced himself in the book materials, but they expect that you, if you can imagine like a cold teacher, they expect that you've made it to that teacher. That I once understood that like say a person was in a training venue, like you have like drop down and give me 10 push-ups. You think that you're giving those push-ups to the person training you, but actually you're a little bit of opposition to the person that's training you if it's a real training venue. Because if it's a real training venue, like for something like, and I'm referencing like the aesthetic of like military with that, you could potentially, there's a brilliant book that I watched in college. I took history at the Lake Devil's Lake Community College Lake Region Community College out of Devil's Lake had a launch program with UND back in the day, and I took classes there at UND with faculty that were familiar with UND, and I think they would teach both at UND and Devil's Lake, or they were just part of they're part of Lake Region Lake Region College Devil's Lake, but they were on the UND campus preparing us. What's up, Hamja, beautiful name. If you could say, Hamja, call me brother. If you could say where you're from, Hamja, I'd really like to know where you're from because that name is so awesome. I've looked a lot into the East, more so India than any other place in the East. But Hamja, see, do you understand Sylheti language? I'm from Bangladesh. Oh my goodness, that sounds so beautiful. Just saying Sylheti. I don't know if I'm close to the pronunciation. Sylheti in Bangladesh. He says, I don't understand what you are saying. Read. Okay. Good. I am gonna talk slower. That will make this channel better. You are right. I've been places lately I've been learning, and I've been looking past to speak slowly. Bangladesh is a beautiful country. That just that word, Bangladesh, is beautiful. Hamja is also beautiful. I don't know very much about the Sylheti language. I've gotten better with Spanish, and I'm wanting to. I will say Duolingo on the app Duolingo. You can really get chops quickly with. Hey, shout out, subscribe. With Duolingo, you can learn chops quickly in another language to English. Serio, un momento, por favor. Serio bendecido encuentra a ti. Si serio bendecido mejor si ti escucha la música de mi guitarra, cadena de la guitarra, esta cadena de mi contact you. This brother said contact you. I'm gonna make a way to I'm gonna make a project so that I can be contacted. So this is the first time I've been asked that, and I'm gonna make I'm gonna put that as a project so I can be accessed. I'm in the United States. So I'm from USA, and you're gonna eat my head off, man. Man, you're gonna eat my head off, man. I need my head so I can talk. You're gonna eat my head up. But I was trying to flex my Spanish chops, and I can go on a little bit. And it's the poesía de español, mind you. Sí, mi mente yo Estados Unidos. Mi language de mi madre es inglés. Para mi español es bueno rápido que Duolingo. Poquito tiempo de Duolingo es más mejor que todo mi 12 años de escuela, todo mi cuatro libros, no, 6 libros de escuela. Duolingo is más mejor. The language, this brother was telling me about Sylheti, and I want to learn that. I tried the Hindu. I haven't got all the way past Spanish, but the Hindi is very difficult. It's intelligible. It's really cool. You start to think differently. My self-esteem and my social skills have gained a lot by classical guitar music that's reminiscent of Spain, classical voice lessons, but also learning another language. I had when I was growing up, I had like some people in my life that were like they were like brothers to me because they came from the same country as me in Namibia, and I met them in America, but they had way advanced social skills my whole life. Like it's very hard to hold my own with them socially, because they were a little bit older than me, but their social skills were so strong. But what's more interesting is that they were duolingual. They were Afrikaans and English at least, and so I think that a lot of what you do to learn, it's not only the subject that you learn, but it's the connections that you make. Like some people would say that you only have so much of your brain that's normally accessed. That is really profound. I think that sometimes, like when people say they've now legalized ganja, THC. If you do ganja for the first time, it may startle you, it may scare you just to see reality. The scarier part, ganja is not actually scary. If you had some ganja from Mother Earth, ganja, and I have I just like, hey man, hold up man, hey, why don't you come keto? So someone old enough, right? You just had your 21st birthday, right? Come here. I can do this with one hand, right? No stems, no sticks, no seeds, right? Here, puff on this, right? Now I'm with sobriety, right? Does this look scary to someone, right? I'm on here, right? I'm showing you. You want to see a magic trick, right? There's nothing there, right? So I'm gonna act like I'm at a party, right? And we're gonna get split for the first time. But so this is the ganja, right? So does this little paper? Does this look scary to somebody? This little paper. Now, it could be scary because nowadays you have things that weren't around when I was around. It felt like what you have now, but you could have something that can have you out of here. But even if you did have something that wasn't, that actually, heaven forbid, you OD'd on something, right? Overdosing is, I'm not promoting overdosing, but overdosing is not the worst thing that can happen in the way to transition out of this life. We are so afraid of being afraid. Is what I'm saying is that a spliff is not scary. If that was the best spliff or the worst spliff, the spliff is not scary. Our training is what's scary. Our false notion, the the stories that we're told from when we're very young that scare us, our experiences of living and dying, but how our thoughts about living and dying while in the process of living and dying. That's what scary is. Our narrative, and then what's done to spin narratives. I've only ever seen my mother. Um, I've only ever seen my mother. I'm sorry, my father scared when talking about poverty. My father's from Namibia, but sometimes he would take like he grew up getting back to South Africa, and then he was familiar with South Africa, and then he worked at one of these colleges in the northern United States, and he would chaperone students. One of his last jobs while working regular jobs, he would chaperone students to South Africa, and so he would take American students, young, impressionable, naive, risk-taking, fun-having, fun-loving American college students, new to college. He would take them to enjoy themselves in South Africa, in Namibia also. His purpose was in Namibia, but Namibia is not far from South Africa. They'd get over there, and he'd take them to have a good time there, to give them an experience. My dad, but that's not where my dad started with that. My dad, way back in the day, my dad was part of an organization called SWAPO. I made different. I'm not from. I wasn't raised in. I wasn't indoctrinated to that or influenced by that. But my dad, I've said made reference on this channel that my dad was politically active and organized in his early years, and then he also had a scholarship to study under the Lutheran Church because he was a strong student. But he was involved in something called SWAPO, and back then way back in the day, you could be landlocked into, like, say Namibia, where we're from. It's a very desert-like place, and I think that the bigger purpose of the church and finance in general, but it's actually law and order as it comes all the way down from the church in our sense of ethics. It's exactly to protect private property, which is the means to enjoy life upon the earth and the resources that are life upon the earth. So if you take an area that's already desolate, that land can support its natural inhabitants like any land can. What would be viable back in the day. Like now, we're deathly afraid of death and thereby life, because life isn't dying and dying isn't living daily. But we scurry from, we hoard for, and we avoid living so much that we may not actually be congruent, because all people in the past would have, not everyone would have survived childhood. Not everyone would have survived. Not everybody would conceive. Not everybody would survive in utero. Some babies would be born premature, not survive birth. Some babies would be born premature or regular and survive birth, and their mother not survive, or them and their mother not survive. Some children would die in infancy. Some children would die in toddlerhood. Some children would die in childhood. Some in adolescence. Some in teenage. Some in early adult. Some in young adult. Some in adult. Some in adult. Some in seasoned adult or older adult. Some in seasoned adult. Some in old age. So you would have. So at no point in life is anything promised, is anything guaranteed. But we try to form fit things such, but also we leverage power by presenting as though we can form fit things, and we're more afraid of natural processes. So I'm saying that, but like where my father would be from, like South Africa, I'm sorry, Namibia to South Africa, that land is desolate enough, but you can survive it. They were cattle rearing prior to, as I understand, prior to contact with colonialism, or at least during early colonialism. I'm actually not very versed more than a few hundred years on our people, the Herero and the Ovambo people. The Ovambo being from North Namibia / Southern Angola. But all I meant to say is that when you introduce private property to a land that's already difficult and rugged, like, it's not bad. It's my dad, like, sometimes snow was new to my dad when he came to the United States, but my dad would tell me like what it looks like. Like sometimes in the desert there, it's so desolate that the land itself is thirsty. Not only are the people. Can you imagine the land being thirsty? Sometimes you feel that. Like, imagine you go through the Southwest United States. Sometimes the land is so rugged, it's actually thirsty. My dad would tell me about these desert rainstorms that would come through, and how after that rain would come through, these riverbeds that were otherwise desolate, they'll be gushing with water. There'll be life spurring. There'll be creatures in the ground that you didn't know were hibernating, because it's so desolate and dry. That's how much of a blessing water would be in the natural give and take buoyancy that makes life worth living. Like sometimes I used to, not to flex, but I used to exactly contribute to both the Salvation Army and feed the children, because I felt it was important to impact local and abroad for children as I could afford. I did that at the $20 tier for a while. Sometimes that's not the only contributions I made to them or to life, but for a while I sustained that dual. And I noticed that my finances were more in check when I did that. Like sometimes it'd be like, oh man, they're really gonna hit me up. They're really gonna be all serious about taking these dues out right now when I could otherwise splurge this. But actually, tempering your finances a little bit with something meaningful to you is a better way, I think, to keep your actual finances in check and have you actually having more. And recently, about a month or so ago, I was blessed with an Uber ride with someone that was he observed Islam in his life, and he said that in their faith they also observe tithes and offering. That means like contributions like of alms, but not to an established church, but to opportunities in life to give to people as someone would have. So this brother was saying that he would like to contact me. That may be a step up for me in making myself accessible to people, and just doing more of engaging with people, and that's where blessings really are at. But all I'm saying is that natural, you actually enjoy some of these. When I would contribute to like Save the Children, every once in a while they would give me a catalog, which is like it would show me pictures of like kind of like when I was young, they would do this kind of cool but kind of egregious thing where they'd have children sell to the community. That's good because it's training entrepreneurship. I didn't understand that when I was young, the good part of that. But you got kids out there advertising to other kids, but more so their parents. So you have kids selling candy to adults. That's a conflict of interest right there, and they probably still do that at a lot of elementary schools. But the bigger thing is that I'm saying you see those catalogs like you'd be selling from a catalog. You're like, damn, why am I selling this for the school? I wish I could afford that. But if you sell this much of that, then you can get this lower truth thing on that catalog. But with that Save the Children thing, they would show like pictures of people in other countries, like say Bangladesh and Africa and like parts of like war torn other parts of Europe, and these people. I shouldn't have said war torn. I don't recall exactly war torn, but I remember both Africa and like Bangladesh, Eastern. Um, when people have less, they're actually happier like that. And I've actually experienced that in my own lifetime within the last 1 to 2 months. Like the way I'm attired right now, right? This isn't even my entire outfit right now, but these clothes were gifted to me at a clothing bank, and they were clean, fresh. I bet you that whoever donated these clothes, they're like, hey man, I'm feeling righteous today, man. Forget it, man. I'm gonna put my that cool green shirt, man. I'm gonna put that one out there. And then also I was at this clothing bank, and then I pick up a lady's blouse like that, right? A lady's blouse, right? Now, do you have enough? Do you have enough? Are you confident enough in yourself to wear a feminine leaning attire? And does that make you more or less of a man? That's actually that's up for that's a little bit. There's some that's up for I think that's up for debate, and I don't think that's settled. They presented that was presented around early 2000 as though it's cool to wear pink, to rock pink. But I'm not saying that pink is good or bad. But I'm saying that just because you can do something doesn't mean that it suits you. And I think that like every once in a while, like nowadays, a lot of lifestyles are cool, good to go. I support all lifestyles that work for a person. That if you enjoy it and it's ethical, if you can stand up for it, stand down to it, and get down with it, I say good. I'm saying also things have a lot of things have a dual and there are blessings, there are strong suits and shortcomings with things, but most people over their life have heard the trope. Like sometimes you hear like older people like giving each other a hard time. That's called rebalding, RIBALD. Like say you have like some old timers. Like sometimes I would see real actual friends. I learned a lot at these bases I'd work at, like as a school bus driver, and I see these men. They're like 60, right? They're like late 50s, 60, near mid 60s. These two guys, they have such a friendship. They're like closer friends than married couples, but they're not about giving each other a pat on the back. But they wouldn't know what to do with each other. They have so much of rebalding each other that they wouldn't know how to get through a day without giving each other a hard time. But it's in good faith, and it's constructive for them. Some songwriters have been like that. There's a book called On Songwriting by Paul Zalo. I actually had a friendship like that in childhood. I had a friend that was very close with me like that, and he would give me a hard time, and then I would just have to suck it up and get past the stuff that he would say because he was older. But he had these sophisticated social skills. I think him and his family, because they were bilingual. But it's like an actual workable like friendship, and you get a lot of your blessings. And sometimes when you have something like that going on, the blessings are bigger than you too, because you're actually making each other better. Before I had that friend like that, or in between that, I'd have these friends in the Southwest, and we'd be very competitive about basketball. Me and my friend from my country, we were actually we were more competitive about socializing, like social skills. But before, we're like when we come of age and start like being interested in girls. But before that, my friends in the Southwest, we'd be really giving each other a hard time. And basketball was a whole movement during the '90s. But you can sometimes have these things, these blessings, like when you have that healthy rivalry. It's actually not all the way cool, but it somehow is just barely viable, like life itself, and it impacts other people because you get the chops so much that now you're having real chops at something that can impact other people. But all I'm saying is that so. I was trying to say about these guys that give each other a hard time like that, but but that's called rebalding. But then like so you'd have like these and so that's like the right kind of buoyancy, the give and take that a real friendship is constituted as. But nothing is set in stone. Some people would you can try to avoid animosity will undo animosity can unsee any friendship, any acquaintance in any instant or any iteration of seasons. Animosity and contempt and jealousy, if you don't squash them, if you have it really is almost biblical proportions that if you have a difference with someone and you care about this someone, it's good to quell that while you can before you would have an actual mean, deep-seated, that's called inveterate, INVATERATE thought about another person. That starts to constitute animosity and what's called bad blood, and that's harder to heal. That actually requires atonement on a spiritual level, according to like the Christian canon. That would have been like with scapegoating animal sacrifices in times past, and then and then beyond that and through that would be just the example of a man who chooses love over pride, the story of Jesus Christ. But I didn't mean to get biblical with that or religious with that, but just that but life is barely viable that whole time, and it's such as that it's spiritual. Life is spiritual, and nothing is given in life, or nothing is without cost, and nothing is just given all the time without work. So life is barely viable, but it's that buoyancy. But when you see these people in these magazines, they have an actual healthy buoyancy where if you're actually a little bit so I was saying that like I get cooler clothing when I'm actually having less of things going on for me. I'm still maintaining my health, but I'm still asking for help. It's very important to at one day, I think everyone in this life, you will have to ask for help, or if you don't ask for help, you'll keep doing your way and it'll hurt more because it actually would have been better if you would have asked for help. But help itself is still it's give and take, so it's not all the way worked out. But we'll be humbled whether we humble ourselves by overworking or underworking or asking for help or not asking for help. We'll still be humble, but help is important and it does make things better. Nothing and no one is perfect. As soon as someone would say the word perfect, oh, perfect, you know you have in your dishonest dealing. As soon as someone would level the word perfect as though there is anything perfect. But so too, most people like I was saying, like with that rebalding, if you can imagine those guys giving each other a hard time like that, sometimes adult men, they can get pretty rough with their rebalding. Like I'll be at shelters, and like these grown men, they can push the envelope of being hilarious, being enlightening, being true, but also being like quick-witted and a little bit like mean-spirited, and you can take that as you will, and that'll be as real as the way you would take it. That's the way it is for a lot of people. But most people have heard the trope, hey man, so I bet you wear your sister's so if I were to show this thing that I got, right, this blouse that I got in a actual clothing bank, hey man, I bet that be your sister, I bet you wore your sister's this and that ones. Would be significant about wearing your sister, like cross-dressing, right? I back in that time when the color pink became fly in like 2002 2003, but it started 2002, I think, with Cameron hopped out of a Cadillac in pink, but it caught traction for a couple years after that. And then Fat Joe had a video where he's like, lean back. He said I think it might have been the same rap song. He's like, I like to punk people just to see the response. But then he's also wearing pink. What I'm saying is that that was like a trend. That was a fad, and I think that fads are part of population regulating populations in human societies, where you have people that win with the fad and people that lose with the fad, and that's actually life and death. You have people and things and organisms that are eating, and those are that are being eaten. So you have the host the predator. And I think that, for lack of a better word, some of the fads work like that. So if I'm at a clothing bank, right, or so what's more significant, but so a lot, so back in that time, like 2004, there was this one dance, I think it was Homecoming 2004. If anybody, it would be actually interesting if anybody ever lands on this video and you're from the St. Paul area, and you remember a homecoming dance where one dude in that dance, he broke out pink Jordans with some blue jeans, some kind of pink shirt, or no, a Carolina jersey with like some pink writing. He had actually went to a girls store and bought female Air Jordans. But like, so a lot of people don't know, any woman's shoe is exactly 2 sizes smaller or bigger than a man's. So a man's size 9 is a woman's size 11. A woman's size 13 is a man's size 11. So he did that. He calibrated to get these female Jordans. But when he did that at the dance, this one girl was like, man, everybody just can't do that. Most people have heard that say, I bet anyone hearing this, you heard someone say, man, anybody can't just rock pink. Like something ain't something. Anybody can't just something. People say stuff like that. But the deeper part of that is that how, when, where, whereby, how do you live? Also, when you would adopt, because some colors actually, if you look at like a lot of Nike shoes, or not just Nike, any kind of shoe, sometimes the actual, you're like, damn, that one look cool right there. Oh, that's a women's. Oh, I can't even order that. Or, oh, sometimes it'll be even a children's size, and they'll have, that's called a colorway. The combination of colors will be a certain colorway. And so sometimes the actual female colorway, they're actually a little bit interchangeable. Like when I was in the 90s, I would wear these things called cross trainers. They would call, like nowadays you call things like tennis shoes, basketball shoes, like the dunks, the SB dunks, the skateboarding dunk aesthetic became very popular, and it's been back in vogue for a few, like 5 years or so now. But back in the day, you would have these shoes that were just called cross trainers. And like when you were a kid, like when I was a kid, I wanted the shoes that would look like they make you run faster, jump higher. I wasn't just interested in shoes to look cool. I wanted them to look cool while making me faster, jump faster, stronger. Like, because I was still thinking like an action figure hero as a kid. But we would call things cross trainers. But some of the colors, that you could tell the difference mostly between male and female, but you couldn't outright tell sometimes what would be male and female, and it would look just as cool. So I'm saying, where is the line, and how is the line between cross-dressing anything or like cool colors? So it's pink. So like, okay, so I'm looking at, if you look at this video here, the chat, you have some people here, Yana Haryanto, with some smiley faces, and that what's up, and Lorden said hi, so okay, so what I was saying is that Yana Haryanto said hello, bro. I was about to say I would think that would be a male because of the level of engagement, because it's like three posts in a row and then some emojis, and that's more of a male, is that males are comfortable being familiar quicker than females. But familiarity is also part of fighting. Like when you can be like real cool, like, hey, what's up, man, I'm such and such, but that's also a little bit forward. And like males are still figuring each other out, and they're liable to come all the way around to disagreeing as soon, or as long as they've known each other. So just by the level of engagement, I can appreciate that's a male. But also, there's a purple color that this person, it's like a purple color it's like a king. He's saying king number 1, so he's shouting me out. I think he's saying, man, you number 1 with it. That's cool. But I want to say, what the interesting thing is that that's actually pink. I'm sorry, purple. That's purple now. Now, some people would say the color purple, and they would say like, oh, this is a feminine color. One time I said that in front of my dad. I said something that, like, how is it that I said to my dad, how is it that the older guard of Christianity is more like, or a lot of religion is like patriarchal, and it's male leaning, and it emphasizes like, if you look at the old books of the Bible, like sometimes they'll describe very elegant clothing and stuff like that. If you appreciate how clothing impacts your life and how you're engaged and how interactions happen, clothing is way deeper and solemn and actually spiritual. Your garments are actually spiritual in how they're impacting how people think of you, how people approach you or choose not to approach you, and what happens from there that can amount all the way up to destiny, is how significant attire is. But these old, and also like decoration and ambiance and arrangement of things, They would call that feng shui. I don't mean to conflate traditions, but they would call that feng shui. I can't know. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, or they would call that elegance and like decoration in the Western like biblical canon. But they'll go into great detail in some of these old books of the Bible about the stencil and the silver lining and the purple of this one and but I'll say to my father, why is the Bible so patriarchal and masculine leaning, but then they're referencing purple? And my dad said, no, no, no. Purple is a royal color. And so this person did that. That's a deeper thing here, is that you have a king hat here, but also they say heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I didn't claim that. Some things you have to be called. But I'm saying that the person put a king emoji with the number 1. But you would say, is that feminine? For in the same one that says hello bro, you have the color purple. How may there be solidarity, masculine solidarity? Because I'm presenting myself with a mustache and beard. That's masculine leaning. So someone saying what's up bro, but it's purple too. How is that not? How is that congruent? It is congruent because purple is a royal color according to my father, but also according, you would appreciate a lot of things that are purple that are royal, and that can. I was gonna do another video about the significance of colors. I was wanting to do that since the fall, but all to say is that what would be more significant than a color, right? So in the as far back as biblical times, a king, a royal person could employ the color purple and still be masculine as masculine, power, excellence, masculine and feminine together. Have it as you will, but power no less. Masculine, if you want it that way too, also no less. Power, but also rich people have always had like weird lifestyles. That's part of being rich. But I'm saying that there's nothing less than or not masculine about purple. But now people are sometimes males are comfortable with pink, and it can be in sway, and it can be very simple. It can be very general for a male to wear pink. That changed in my lifetime because I grew up in the 90s. I was solidly a child of the 90s. I was born a month before the month of 85. And then so I had 4 years of the 80s, 10 years of the 90s, and then a month before the fourth year of the 2000s, I was 18. So that's squarely on the 90s. But I didn't see a lot of pink when I was growing up for men. But what I'm saying is that what's more significant, so the difference between royal as a purple as a royal color, pink as a color that you would choose out, and you don't care if it's advertised as a grocery or not, you're gonna make it pop like that, and you can still win on dates like that. You can be masculine like that, you can be feminine like that, you can be both like that as it serves you like that. Or if it doesn't, then that too, if you were to walk into a woman's store that's just straight women's store, and use something, appropriate something. Now Aaliyah the singer, she had a male stylist. A lot of people may not know the Aaliyah like that had like the hair, like she had the cool hair. Aaliyah, the singer from the 90s, in some of her outfits like with the leather, that was a man that put her up to that swag. Now, was he more or less masculine that he could put her up to? Was he more of a man that he could make Aaliyah that much of a woman, of a lady? I'm more than a woman, more than a woman. The whole world wouldn't believe Aaliyah as more than a woman and rock the boat the way that they do, and the way that people rock with that to this day, entirely the same way, if it also wasn't for also that man that was her stylist. So they'll go to like different cities, because I watched some of the interviews about her back in the day. I went on an Aaliyah rabbit hole. And so they'll go to a new city, and he'll go check out the kinky stores, the leather stores, the lady stores. He's like, damn, you look fine in that. So he's as much of a man that he can make her that much of a woman. Is that interesting? It takes a woman to make a man makes a woman, but also a man makes a woman more feminine. Does a woman also make a man more masculine? How is it that a man makes a woman who's already feminine more feminine? How does a woman who's feminine make a man also more masculine? That's some of the polarity of life. But the difference in any of that, how he could do that, how he could be as much of a man, or how he could be transcendent or feminine enough to put Aaliyah up to that, to be feminine enough to inspire the man out of everyone and the woman out of everyone, is that how you see yourself. So the difference between any of that, or even putting on your sibling's clothing, the same or different gender sibling, would be, how do you see yourself for doing that? So if you would buy it in a catalog, if someone, I'm now rocking a purple jacket because I met a lady friend in Detox twice, and we had some cool experiences together, and she let me keep her jacket, and I rock it as a purple color. It's royal, but like some people may or may not. Like I'll be attiring myself, and they're like, man, this fool about to put on a purple jacket that look like a lady's jacket. But then when they see the outfit I'm putting together, then it can go back from masculine to feminine because of what I'm up to with it. So I'm saying this blouse here. Now, if I just straight put on a woman's blouse, I'm not actually having enough of a love life right now that I can just do that and it just be all grown man time. Like, yeah, man, yeah. So what? I'm wearing a blouse. Well, so what? Or I'm not trying to be. I'm just saying that I'm creating myself as I go. But right now, I'm not in an economic standpoint to be entertaining like a lot of different lifestyles because I have to get my act together, such as I'm in a gym. But you didn't also know that you can tie this around your head the way I've been doing, and I got headphones in, and now I start to look different with this, right? Do I start to look different with this? Now I look one way like this, right? I'm not trying to mock anything or be flippant, but then I can tie it more as it would be like American style. Then it starts to be more like a do-rag like that. Then I got my earbuds in. Then I put a shoelace around it to keep it tight, and it's a completely different look. But then also, it's like camo, but it has the purple. It's like royal camo. So it's like camo, but it's not for killing people, hurting people. It's like a royal version it's like serene, like a knight of the guard, a knight that is not about violence, is not about hurting people. That's how much of ambivalent clothing can be, and how you can do style up and down. But the significant part of all that, and what I'm saying is that what it means to you, but then also to other people, and what that means for you. And that is actually what I wanted to land on today. Was that a couple things is that I was going all the way back to the Game Spitter, and he was saying that that in life, when you have something happen for you, so they say, I've heard other sources say that nobody actually changes without being prompted to. You don't really change. You don't do the things you don't go to detox. You don't go to rehab. You don't go to the shelter. You don't go to a new job, to an old job. You don't go somewhere unless it's bad enough. It's serious enough. It's dire enough. Not one more iota, not more inch. No, it cannot be done. That might be actually your last bit of a saving grace, is just that clear enough thought, is that this can't go any further. That assertiveness. That assertiveness is from different times in your life when you do things like, hey man, I'm drinking some pop tonight, but dang, I gotta get up in the morning and I gotta give mom and dad a ride to the doctor. I can't drink that whole pop because I'm gonna need to wake up in the morning. This sucks. I'd rather slam that pop. I don't have much else going on in the day, but I still gotta get them there in time. That little discipline you did right there. Or I was listening to this song by Tupac tonight. It was saying, you never had a friend like me. I actually had a friend that exactly reminded his own brother, and a lot of people, of Tupac. He would be reminiscent of Tupac. But Tupac himself said, you never had a friend like me. But also Tupac was about pouring one out for the homies. The deeper thing, that's called a libation. When you pour out liquid as in solidarity or in reverence or in homage to something, that's called a libation. That discipline you're working up right there. You're practicing that. The different things you do in your life that are actually challenging yourself, practicing up to something, it gives you that salient thought that when you're about to go too far of no return, you're about to go to the wrong party, get in the wrong car, slam the wrong drink, puff on the wrong something. That's that salient thought that this is wrong, this is not good. But also the assertiveness, you believe yourself enough, your image of yourself enough, and how you would attire yourself and how that impacts your image is part of that, but less so your image of yourself. That's also from your firsthand knowledge of what you do and don't do in front of people and behind people, but also in front of people for having done it behind people, and again behind people. Your integrity, that is going to give you that clear thought that the assertiveness, because it's not assertive if it's not backed by something. When you're being assertive when you're advocating for yourself, when you're humbling yourself, but such as it suits you, that's the power that you have to do that is from your integrity. And for a lot of people, that takes like a name, they would take the name of Jesus Christ in America, where I'm from, for that. But there's other Solomon and sacred names that have helped people in America and abroad, and so that's very significant. And then when other people believe in that same name, that's now a current, and that's real lived human experience that's congruent on a lot of levels, that has a force behind it. And so that might be the means of someone. Now I haven't been observant as in terms of church going for a lot of my adulthood, but I read a book called Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer, who was a prolific evangelist when I was young and impressionable as an early adult, and she would talk about in that book disciplining your very thoughts. That's not her original statement. That's part of our idea. That's part of the Holy Scriptures where it says that you're to lead all thoughts captive to the name, the purpose, the honor, the meaning, the import of the figure of the Messiah. But in layman's terms, in modern terms, she broke down what that actually is like, and I think she referenced her then young adult son also, and how the very thought that as soon as a thought would occur to you, I had this friend, the friend I said from Namibia that was like a few years a few years older than me, and he would say things like, "Man, one time I asked him like, man, when I go to high school, like, man, what if the toughest dude in the whole school come and try to pick on me? What then?" He's like, "Man, it's mind over matter, man. Don't even try to kid yourself. Don't get yourself in something hot you can't handle. Don't kid yourself." He said that was one cool thing. Then he also said, uh, I was trying to go somewhere with that. He said, uh, um, oh, he said he doesn't entertain certain things. Like, so like when it comes to certain thoughts, he does not entertain that. I had learned that prior to him saying that. There'd be some of these shock websites on the internet when I was coming of age in the late, when the internet was coming of, I was coming of age as the very internet was coming of age in the late 90s when the internet became prolific. I was in adolescence, middle and late middle and early high school, all the way exactly culminating on the year 2000. I would have been the end of the 90s, 99, coming into 2000. I was my freshman year of high school, and if you can imagine where the internet was, that was exactly the .com boom. That was when Napster was popping. That's when .com was popping. Amazon, NBA.com, stuff like that. It was exactly popping. MySpace, what was finna be YouTube and Facebook and stuff like that in a couple years. That was already popping as MySpace, BET, Black Planet. Stuff like BT.com, Black Planet. But the only reason I say that is because um dang, I was going somewhere with that thought. Um but my friend was like, but these shock websites would be up there, and you could see actually what it looks like when someone took their own life, like what it had to look like for someone to clean that up. And that was so impressive to me and daunting to me, because at that time in middle school, I was already, sometimes I'd be out. I could be cool in middle school, but I was this kind of other kind of guy like that. And sometimes if you didn't know better to discipline your thoughts, you can entertain thoughts of anything, and also there's sometimes energy to be gained in self. I don't part of it, not entertaining thoughts is not having words in your vocabulary. So some people wouldn't say certain words that start with S, but also people wouldn't say something that start with a something party, that a P, ITY party, like that. That would change. If I just said that word, that would change the tenor of this video, and it would start to sound more complacent and sympathetic versus empathetic, which is better. And so it would start to sound like a woe is me, and that's not a position of strength. And you can't. I don't think you can contribute well if from a non-position of strength, unless you're being honest and you're humbling yourself by being honest. But that would be attended by help. But I'm not asking for help with this. What I'm saying is that seeing that image, and then a couple years later hearing my friend say that he doesn't entertain certain things, that let me know what it means to control, to discipline your thoughts. And then a couple years after that, when I became an adult, I came across that book, Battlefield of the Mind, which was recommended to me by Sister Tish. Anyone who's she was very influential in the Twin Cities at some gospel churches. Anyone from the Twin Cities, if you're actually really cut like that from the gospel vicinity of or churches of the Twin Cities, like anywhere from the late 90s to 2006 or so. We lost her early. She impacted a lot of youth, including myself, and she would participate. She was already then having adult children. She had a son who was already a man and incarcerated by then. She had been from Chicago, and she had been from a rough lifestyle. And her husband then, who she had many children with, was her, I think he might have been her second husband, and he was a minister then. And I don't mean to tell their business, but they were equally influential. He was more of a strict, observant man, and he was an example of a consecrated man, chaste and given over to his higher power, is him, for him Jesus Christ, but him too being from the street background, and then her not being more savvy and cool to young people seeming, but also very keen and aware. And she would be impacting people, young people like myself, to give us cooler things to do than to be in just general vicinities of the greater city life. If for teenagers that are unoccupied or don't have anything cooler to do than be at a job, because if all you're a young person, all you have going on is to be at a job, you can get into things like you can get into lifestyles quickly at just a regular job if you don't if you're not actually being tasked with something constructive or inspired by something creative. So she saw in me something. She once spoke over me that she saw something of a prophetic calling in me, and that hit when she said that to me. I didn't have I had experiences like that. I had comments made like that by my mother, but I didn't fancy that, or I didn't lean into that, or lead with that, or seek for that. But I would be scared by substances. Some of the thoughts that would occur to me, just like deep thoughts, like when I'm eating peanut butter, do I actually look crazy because it just gets stuck in your throat like that? You can't actually swallow peanut butter. How would I look eating peanut butter? And then with all my friends and how half-assed and how two-faced we are to each other, how crazy and how two-faced I am to my family, because that was before a lot of information about like family dynamics had proliferated. How crazy would that look if there's a camera right there to observe all that? How would I look on a TV show? Could I survive being on a reality TV show? I would think about stuff like that. But she recognized me. I one time I fell asleep. I won't say the artist. I still like this artist. He was an artist from the G-Funk era. He didn't lead as a gang banger, but he had been a gang banger, and he was comfortable with some gang banging references in his music. He never claimed his you would have to be more into that lifestyle to know what his affiliation was by his comments, but he was just playing around like that whole 90s scene. G-Funk era, the 90s was very kind of relaxed and too loose around like real street stuff, because that bad wicked stuff was going on back then. But I was listening to one of his, but he was kind of halfway street and halfway enlightened, which you can meet people like that. But I fell asleep listening to one of his songs. He had a song about his mother that I liked a lot. That was my favorite song of his. But I fell asleep listening to one of his then recent songs, like early 2000s, and I had this crazy dream listening to it on the bus, falling asleep like that. And I told her about that, and she thought that was prophetic. And then she recommended that book. But all I'm saying is that book teaches you to discipline your thoughts. And if you discipline your thoughts, that's the standpoint to discipline anything else. And then so that will give you that moment of clarity before you jump over into something. But you still need you will be, I think we'll all be humbled whether we ask for help, whether we don't ask for help. And both when we ask for help and when we don't ask for help, we'll be taxed differently, because none of that is perfect at any point. And if you'd hear the word perfect, that's a tell right there. Actually, if someone said perfect, that's a tell right there in your face. And think about that. Oh, perfect. Oh, perfect. How did I not sound that? If anything I said on this whole channel, that should be the sketchiest thing I've said right there. Perfect. Oh, that's perfect. Completely perfect. Because there is no such thing like that, because it wouldn't be balanced enough to be viable. So this thing about like dressing up, dressing down, doing cool colors, doing less of colors, doing necklaces, doing jewelry, doing hair. A lot of people would comment like on the hair that I do and stuff like that. Having a mustache, not having a mustache. Back in the day, like around the early 2000s, there would be a term called metrosexual. They don't say that as much anymore. That means like where I think that's somebody who is masculine, but they could seem feminine, or they play actually the actual figure as it's presented of the Messiah, the way that the Messiah is drawn, especially in Euro, more so in Eurocentric iterations of that figure. I've seen Afrocentric renditions of the Messiah where it's actually blasphemous according to the scriptures themselves. There is actually some redundancies and there's some redundancies and contradictions in what's known as modern Christianity, the New Testament of which that I can appreciate from being somewhat familiar and exposed to the Old Testament, which I went over a lot as Abrahamic tradition. It is, and then as something of Islam as also an Abrahamic tradition, and then things that I've heard of otherwise when I've been blessed for brief moments with people that otherwise be from Abrahamic traditions, is that it's actually it's blasphemous, and it's one of the most blasphemous things you can do is to actually utter the name of a higher power, much less draw a higher power or draw anything. According to some of the old iterations of strict scripture, It's actually blasphemy to draw a picture of anything because everything has already been created. It's also blasphemy to do music sometimes, even music and worship. That's a little bit profound there, and that actually might be one of the divergences between the Afrocentric and also indigenous to different areas of the earth worship and Eurocentric. Because when I say that it will be considered blasphemous, that's according to the Old Testament of the Abrahamic traditions, based on some of the insights of Elijah Muhammad, who was from the Nation of Islam, that's different than Islam that's endemic to the Middle East, but not is another iteration, but it's not separate in itself or divert. I can't speak clearly on that, but I know that the Nation of Islam, they are appreciated as the only organization that has successfully and convincingly produced change, reform, and people of criminal lifestyles or failing lifestyles or degenerate lifestyles or unhealthy lifestyles convincingly, statistically, with less and less, and sometimes non-existent recidivism. That's like the tendency to repeat or relapse. That's all recidivism. The Nation of Islam has been the most successful. And then to some of the venues I visited and had my future salvaged before I get a chance to mess it up as a young person, were reminiscent of, and actually had members who had prior been, like when I first went to be, I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ into my life in the fall of 2002. I'm sorry, the spring of 2002, on Otis Street, at the corner of the Living Word Church on Otis Street and Marshall Bridge in St. Paul, one spring morning, when I was in about 10th grade. And before I did that, there had been they were taking communion. I had earlier before that, as a very young child, I had my mother take me to Catholic catechism classes, because there's a beautiful girl in my neighborhood who was about 8 grades older than me, but she showed attention to me, and she was beautiful to me. She was an actual maiden at that point. She was a maiden in some of the full sway, the peak of her youth, and the beginning of the peak of her youth, the full onset of her being a maiden. But prior to her being a developed maiden and an adult, like she would be like in 8th grade or so, I'm referencing. But that's very big to a kindergarten, first grader. But she came, this is the Southwest, so a lot of people were either Native American and or Hispanic and or both, or understood themselves that way. And there's a very deep culture that's versed, Christianity, but more so the Catholic iteration is very pronounced in the whole Latin world, as I understand, or it can be. It's not the only faith, clearly, I don't mean to say that, but Christianity and Catholicity, as Christianity goes, Catholicity means eclectic. I think Catholicity technically means eclectic, like borrowing different resources and also being understanding and enlightened and accepting of other people and respecting other people's past. I think that's what Catholicity actually means. But the Catholic Church has been very formidable and also influential in the Latin worlds and also European, like Irish, and maybe German also, but I know a lot Irish. So my mother is from Catholic background, and then this girl that was inspiring to me was also Catholic. So I went to a communion of my own choosing, but I couldn't hang with the children there because I couldn't hang with the songs. I couldn't even look like I belonged there because they had already been educated and taught in those ways like that would be completely foreign or arbitrary. Not arbitrary, but there's no way a child could be sophisticated enough to fit in around an actual consecrated observance like that, where people are very solemn like that together. But just that, to draw a picture of the Messiah according to the older scriptures, that would be blasphemous. And then I've appreciated that sometimes when people think themselves creative, we're now in a place where, because of the digital space, being creative is a form of class. It's a form of a class differential, even more so than actual economic viability, because something of the dot-com boom, and then also the bust of 2008, the more dot-com booming after that, then what I think was actually a bust of 2019, according to Tashreeq Bey, and then some of the stimulus within that, the bailouts within that, and then some of the lucrative opportunities now that are available because of where we're at economically. That's a function of passing off debt as credit and as capital, but also the connection to opportunities and lifestyles and abilities to be creative. All that has made money itself a little bit more arbitrary and less of a filter than it would have been even in the 90s, where I think the concept of a loser, now we have, so there's been different prototypes of the ideal person or love interest or partner or just member of society. I think way back that would be not when Jesus Christ himself was alive. I think he was not that prototype. If that story is true of Jesus Christ, I don't mean to say if, but I'm just saying that I can't. I'm not a biblical scholar, but according to the story of Jesus Christ, in his own lifetime, like many artists, he was reminiscent, seeming like an artist or at least a bohemian. The word bohemian that has to do with like blood, like hematologist. I think bohemian it means free spirit, but also it connotes free spirit, but I think it actually denotes maybe free blooded. I think that's what bohemian means, and we understand that now is like creative and like going against status quo and mores, which is like a lot of fettering. But in Jesus Christ's own lifestyle, according to those scriptures in the testimony of the Epistle Paul, at least, and the author of the Bible, is that he wasn't actually accepted as a prototype, a stereotypical prototype status quo person. He was anything but that. He's an actual something of an outsider. It was the greatness, but a lot of times, according to Osho, great people, their greatness is still valuable whether it served them or not, and even as it exactly didn't serve them, and then that's appropriated, won over, borrowed from maybe isolated, concentrated, kind of like if you can imagine like the film I Am Legend with Will Smith, where he had done all that research. He had his road dog right there with him, but his road dog finally got infected, but he had managed to preserve his own blood, which contained the solvent for that agent that was out. That was a little bit. Some people, I haven't so far said anything that would sound like conspiracy, but that would exactly look like predictive programming. And the way that the pandemic felt to a lot of people who had seen I Am Legend, I think that I Am Legend was actually training for an exact segue into what we had for the pandemic, whether that was intentional or not. But that thing about there, Will Smith, he's completely out. The whole earth is now compromised by that sickness. That you could say that would be metaphorical of the status quo, that sickness, because the status quo can be wicked. But he was healthy. He survived in it by his mettle, mettle, his grit, his health. They show him exercising very vigorously, as I'm now exercising my mouth at a gym. But his entire plight, he lost his wife and his daughter in a helicopter crash in that film. He lost all that he had, reminiscent of Job, and yet he was still fervent in that. He still maintained his sense of, the deeper thing there is that he maintained his sense of humor. They showed him he's watching the movie Shrek, and he's doing lines back. That was enough to keep him just sane enough to survive that enough. And if anyone's going through hard times, I recommend humor and finding the humor in things, but also it's an opportunity to become more humorous if you practice in hard times. Because like, I had this boss, his name, I'm not gonna say his name, but I was convinced. I would joke with him that he had been an extraterrestrial. But I remember one time he was the type of person where he could hold down a pizza store getting slammed by himself. If you can imagine Papa John's, Domino's, or pizza getting slammed with voluminous orders, and it's like so backed up that it doesn't even matter what's coming out the receipt. This thing just got sold like that. This pizza just got sold. There's no way in hell that can get made in the next 2 hours, as many orders are coming in. He'll handle all that by himself, and then I could handle sometimes the work of about 1.5 or even 2 or 3 drivers based on his coaching, and then some of my grit and my mettle and my facility around a 6 shift, but also just my time being isolated, but also being self-directed and practice a lot of my life. So we were a good team. But one day he was like, man, what the hell? It was like just a stressful moment. Like it was just between him and I. We were closing up a store, and he's like, man, what he said to do about, like, because he needed somebody for the next hour. And yes, I was supposed to go home by now, but he needed somebody else. And I was like, man, Mike, we've been to hell and back. This is just another day in hell like any other night. This is another day in hell tonight, man. What's up with this, man? That was the coolest thing I could have said to him in his world, because that was real humor. It's like some badass shit. It's like, man, this couldn't be any more jacked up while we're about to laugh at it and get through this thing. Like you can take what is insurmountable, indefatigable, untiresome challenge, deprivation, punishment, suffering. But if you have the right stance, that is, the right attitude, which is actually the right stance, anything can be transcended with the right stance and the mental stance that you take with the joke. So if you say the right joke, now we just laughed at this actual bullshit, but we're actually about to do it 10 times stronger because we're on a chord like that and we're having the strength of humor like that. So then later, like a few months later, we were at this meeting he had been transferred to another store, and then I migrated there with him. And I wasn't just his favorite person in the world, but we were successful together. and we had this meeting. He's like, yeah, man, so, this stuff has been messed up, man. But we do got some big dogs around here. T, Louis. So he would. There was a couple of times, and then also like one time, there was like a regional person that came through, and I had made a pizza. I was more so always focused on delivering, but I had made a pizza the way that my big dog had taught me how to make the edge. Like you make the edge of it just like a pencil, exactly the thickness of a pencil, and then it'll come out very nice like that. And I was also using my left hand at that time, why it probably would have stood out to the regional manager because I was training my left hand. And then so when I was gone, the regional manager gave me props. And then Mike called the other drivers were like saying somewhere, he's like, yeah, but the regional manager didn't just call your pizza out. So he would say cool things, but it came from that some of those times where we would mock. That's one time where it is appropriate to mock something, is when you're mocking a challenge or mocking or dire straits. But so I'm saying that the real lessons in life, to add on to what the game spitter said, is that your challenges are, you can't predict where your challenges are come from, nor how you'll succeed in them, and nor even do you actually do the right things in the challenge. But if you're challenging yourself otherwise off of the principle of challenging yourself, that's where I was going with that thing about the that book Battlefield of the Mind. If you are challenging yourself, if you are following your instincts, your inspiration, your voice, that is the best way to describe all of that is just your voice, vocation. It doesn't have to be compensated or not, but it can be or not, and it can be as good compensated or not. When you follow that, your voice, I think the best way to describe someone's voice, someone's purpose in this life is your voice, but it doesn't have to mean speaking at all. That is that the way that you surmount the test is that you've been doing the things that you can do with the means that you have based on the inspiration and the self-challenging you had. And a teacher doesn't have to explain that to you if they're really a real teacher, because they're testing you. And if they're going to go to arms with you or be your leader, or someone can come down and rank, someone that would be your teacher in a real honest venue, they can come down and rank, and you could potentially be leading them one day. But for them to have you trained well, they can't pull any punches with you. They're not actually on your side. They're your first opposition, and they actually exist that way because all people in your group and out of your group are potentially your opposition and or your alliance. The way you would play anything. I was also saying that, but Jesus himself, that picture, that image of him as a bohemian, he's reminiscent. Like you can imagine how status quo it was just in the 19th century or the 1800s to have long hair. That's ostensibly 2,000 years since he existed. How much more rigid would it have been? Stifled would it have been? Status quo would have been. All due respect, at those times where he's actually a proponent of the status quo, because he's a proponent of the promises to Abraham. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the authority to speak according to the names that he's invoking, the way he does. But then also, I don't know how their hair would have looked at that time, the Romans and or the Gentiles and or the people that the Messiah came from. But his particular style, I would imagine, would be different. But it would be the way that he's presented now in a lot of effigies. Like I'm saying, he's influential in Latin American homes. If you go into a home and you see an effigy of him, he'll have he'll be androgynous, that is both male and feminine seeming at once. That is transcendent. It's actually, I think, healthy for a human being to be like that, because we're something of dual. This reality is dual. But that could also be called metrosexual. But that term metrosexual is less common now than it was like 20 years ago, and it means less now. Back then, it could have been a compliment, or it could have been derogatory, or like a weakness appreciated. But now I think it's not appreciated that way. But what I'm saying is that two people can wear, this is a feminine garment, a blouse. If you go to the military, right, you're given I'm also wearing other things I've been gifted. I have some trousers and some hospital pants, some sturdy socks, and some Timberland boots with some cool green laces. All that was gifted to me at different accommodations without me trying to look to be stylish, but just seeing what's available and finding what's available that had been gifted to people on hard times. But also, sometimes when people donate, they actually donate the nicer of their things. But if you were to actually be given a military uniform, right? Now, both men and women can serve in the armed forces. I just saw a picture today of some women in Africa serving, and there's nothing pushover or weak about women serving anything, because women are intelligent and grit If a woman has to do so, a woman can muster a lot of the same of the strength of a man, ostensibly, like if adrenaline kicked in, like to save her family. But also, I've been training. I have once trained for trades work among women and a mixed a mixed cohort. I'm sorry, a co-ed cohort, and the women could pull their weight just as much as I. At that time, I was coming off of an injury, but they could sustain the workload as much as as I could, and sometimes best me and better me, or sometimes not. But a lot of times they could. So I'm not saying that a woman has to be weaker in terms of arm, but there's very masculine seeming about a man being issued a uniform, but the pants are called the trousers, and the actual the torso is called a blouse, the same as a woman. But then if you were to, but the way you'd understand that is that it's what it means to you, the way you're coming to it, the way you're meaning it, the way you're wearing it. That's the difference between it being masculine and feminine, as it serves you and doesn't, as a civilian, as a soldier, and not. So there's this one interview with Anthony Kiedis, the leader of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they're one of those classic groups that have weathered a lot of seasons, and they probably had to reimagine for a business to stay viable. They have to re-engineer itself, according to Galen Whitmore, a former industry insider that I've taken classes with at the Songwriting School of Los Angeles. You um so you, when if you were to wear Anthony, so what Galen Whitmore said is that anyone that's been, so you have Jay-Z, Sean Carter, Jigga, Hove. I don't mean to be derogatory. Some people would say that Hove is a deeper thing, and a clandestine thing, and is reminiscent or parallel of Jehovah. And I don't mean to mince any man's name, any man's personage, even an artist, with that of the great Jehovah, the name of Jehovah. I don't mean to do so, but I'm just saying that this person, Galen Whitmore, in a class at the Songwriting School of Los Angeles, introduction to music business, circa late 2018 at the Songwriting School of Los Angeles. Some of those are still available on demand. It's excellent content that he had there to really teach what life is about and what Shirley deals are about in and outside of music and inside again of music. But also again in life is that real actually successful businesses, they have to rebrand and sometimes near about repurpose, but more so rebrand themselves. That's how they stay with the times and they don't phase out, because then they don't get associated with other trends and modes that are outdated. But I'm saying that trends can serve and they can do injustice, and so some serve. So just like you have capitalism, the actual power of the dollar is dollar bill for a reason. To the one spending, it's a dollar. To the one who owes, to the one calling the tune, or who has the dollar, or is owed money, who either has to spend, is spending as it suits them, or is owed, it's a dollar. To that person who is owing, who is being paid, they're being compensated, but they're also being coerced in that moment, or they're not having, then it's a bill. So it actually has to be, is dollar bill would seem to be an oxymoron, but actually it's a transcendent statement. I appreciate it from Tashrik Bey, Grand Sheikh Tashrik Bey, that the fact that dollar bill is an oxymoron, but then a moronic term, oxymoronic term, that means like two opposite things next to each other. But actually, I think it's a transcendent term, and it's the way that it actually functions is that it's actually a dollar and a bill at once. It's a function of it as a a fluid institution. But then also a lot of things like the way that it's maintained and the sophistication of divide and conquer, and putting different groups against one another, and even some of the agencies that do that have infighting within themselves because they can't get past internecine infighting and outfight. Internecine is called infighting. They can, even there's some of the agencies and the initiatives and interests and standing and holding that would be sophisticated enough to put different groups against one another to make the purchasing power strong. That is classism, class itself strong, having and having not, and owing not, and being owed strong. They're not outside of the ramifications in the calculus of function of internecine infighting. But also they're not it's not beyond them to be Machiavellian enough to initiate some of that and be embroidered in some of that which they would initiate. So but things have to rebrand themselves. But then also Anthony Kiedis, when he was being interviewed in the late I think the aughts, or Aught, AUGHT, and Not, NAUGHT, both refer to the first 10 years of this century. That's called the aughts, or the technical. Some people say the early 2000s, but they don't know that. They may not know that you have the 2010s. That's like 2010 to 2019. But then you have the aughts and knots. That's from 2000, the millennium, Y2K, until the 2010, going into the early 2000s, and now we're in the 2020s, which is all the 21st century. The last century, the 1900s, were the 20th century, because the century that it leads up to is the name of the century, but the hundreds are less than that of the century. So 1900s is part of the 20th century. 2100s is part. 2000s is part of the 21st century we're now in. So they used to say 21st century Fox. Actually, I can't remember if it was 20th century or 21st century Fox while we were yet in the 1900s, in the 90s, but they say 20th century Fox. So that was the 1900s, but Anthony Kiedis then speaking in like say 2000. I was going down a rabbit hole of Red Hot Chili Pepper interviews in like 2014, 2015, but some recent interviews then from like the late aughts to early 2010s, he was saying he had, at that time, he was just having a beard, so he used to have this crazy hair, like give it away, give it away, give it away now. But then at that point, he had like this kind of like a little bit metrosexual, androgynous, feminine leaning, but long hair, and then also just a simple mustache. And a commentator asked him a low-key question. He's like, so what's up with the beard? He's like, if you knew about this beard, you would understand the secret to all of our success. I think what he was talking about was rebranding there. Then another awesome thing near about that time, one of my favorite artists, John Frusciante, their second guitarist, and then I think he took a hiatus and came back around the early 2000, the late aughts and early 2010s. They asked Anthony Kiedis, so how do you feel about drug use? Because I think their original guitarist who made the opportunity for John Frusciante had died of an overdose. And Anthony Kiedis, he used to do like intravenous cocaine, which is very strong, like near about as strong. And cocaine is already dangerous enough through the nose because it's the coca leaf, which can be profound and gentle and beautiful and graceful and healthy in South America. But then it can be ratcheted up by some European scientists in the last 100 or so years, and then it became cocaine. But then also it was ratcheted up again in the 20th century to become cocaine cigarettes, and then what became crack cocaine freebasing, according to Dr. Wesley Muhammad in his book The Pot Plot, and another book he has about the assault of black males, our viability in society, the organized efforts about that had to do with, not the least of which, also the crack epidemic, and before that, social services as they can be destructive or unbecoming or unsuitable for the sensation of having a family and growing up well. And then all that, the aftermath that we're still sustaining now with some of our etiquette and our understanding about like street lifestyles is actually replicating in a little bit in the mode of what was happening in the 90s. And it's not exactly on par with what's going on, the way that things are transacted now. But sometimes even then in the 90s, some of violence was done for the sake of violence, and now still some violence is done for the sake of violence. But the attraction and the viability and the dynamics are now different. Why some people that promote that lifestyle, that sing about that lifestyle, have said things such as the streets are dead. I don't think the streets will ever be dead, because as long as something has been around, it will continue to be around. So the streets as the last means of making income, or as a difficult way of making income when other things are sewed up, hemmed up, as has always been the case, can amount to any form of barter. People will always find ways to barter and deal. I just came out of detox venues, and I was graced that I was there with an instrument, but I was respected for my chops with the instrument, and very few, if any, people tried to actually accost me for my instrument and take it off of me. But they would be offering deals to one another, and they'd be doing stuff like just like trading like cigarettes or chips and stuff like that. And that stuff really go a long way when you're having some of your liberties taken away from you, or just when you're conceding some of them to be there. So from that standpoint, I think the streets there'll always be another word for where people are really saying with the streets is they're saying non-sanctioned transactions is what the streets refer to. I've heard someone say that what street means is that every day you get up and go to the street and you make your money in the street. That is the non-sanctioned transactions. But another way of saying that is just non-sanctioned business affairs, transactions, and any manner of ethics or lack thereof is what the streets are. And then the only difference to that would be law and order. But the law and order that we have in the West now, which is the hegemony for the whole world and replicated by the whole world largely, is from the standpoint of the honor of the Holy Bible and swearing upon that before like Congress and the highest court, like the Supreme Court, and then all down the courts like that. And that's the church itself. But the only thing that I can understand that's actually, because the church now is largely Christian, ostensibly both the Catholic and Protestant. But the only thing that I can appreciate is actually that is really unforgivable, or that is actually the salient principle of the church itself, is private property, actually no less. And the church is the largest holder, I think, of private property, even greater than that of like BlackRock, that has brought up a lot of property equity. I understand in terms of housing as a maybe modern iteration of gentrification, for lack of a better word. But going back in time and in centuries past into the present, I think it has been the church, that is the Catholic Church in particular, that owns the most of property, just strict black and white, the most of ownership of property in general. And that is the standpoint, the rights. Like if you can imagine animals fighting for rights to mate or eat or be somewhere, now human beings have to fight for rights. So now I'm making this iteration at a gym where I have the auspices to be here, but I may or may not be respected for being somewhere. That's the rights to be somewhere. And as I was saying in this video, that can be very punishing in some of the deprivation of nature. Now I'm in a cold reach, but my father grew up in a hot desert, and when private property is at play, or it's arbitrary or it's not fair, there can be blessings with that, but also it can be very tough. So you have no holds barred, unsanctioned transactions. That's the streets and the ramifications that come with that. Then you have the church and notions of private property, but also the ramifications and consequences that yet come with that too, because that's yet less than perfect as it's dealing with humans. You can have it either way like that, but it can be dire. But the more significant thing is, I was just talking about like being able to dispense with appearances, or to use appearances to a strong suit. So understanding something as a blouse, if you understand it as a blouse, that if you understand it to be feminine, then you likely would appear feminine with it, or your understanding of it matters for how it functions with you, but not what it actually means at all, or necessarily to others or to you totally. But I was saying that this thing, and I can attire this thing, like I can with my hair, the length of my hair and some of the options that I have with it, I can make this look like an actual shirt that a woman would wear. And for me, it'll make me look more feminine, because I'm not like right now like knocking down a lot of dates all the time with females where it wouldn't matter. But then also I can assume I can have it like this, and it would look like a rebel, or I can do it more like reminiscent of an urban tie, and it actually does have a function because it's keeping my earbuds in, and then keeping my braids. A lot of people don't know what a do-rag is for. A do-rag, like when you see people wear a do-rag, it's to protect your hair from hats and pillows. So some people with dreads like me anyone can wear a do-rag, because if you wear a do-rag with dreads, it protects your recently braided hair from getting loose, or from getting unkempt, I think you could say, from either hats, like I have like hats, or a blouse that's improvised as a hat / garment. The do-rag protects that. But then also if you had like waves, like, so some people, if you have short hair, if your hair is curly, I could get a little bit of waves, but my hair is a little bit more it's kind of strange. My hair, it's significantly more coarse. That's what they call curly hair, than people who have outright straight hair. But it's also significantly more straight than people that have outright coarse hair. So it's kind of a little bit ambivalent like that. But so I could get waves when I used to rock a buzz. I used to rock a ball fade or a taper in high school, with my hair short in high school. Except for 11th grade, I had a baby fro. I don't know why, but when I was in Memphis, I just didn't cut my hair until I went to like a a vacation, a wedding of my aunt, in the like the late winter, early spring of 2002. Cross halfway cross country trek to visit my aunt's wedding when I had finally cut my baby fro. But before that, since like the end of 10th grade, I had a fro. I don't know why I did that. It was at the same time as I started going to church. But I think that's because I was embracing. That was when I was embracing my black identity. That's when I started, and my African American Majora identity. I didn't know that term then, or the distinctions about that then. But that's what I was leaning for. It had become my life. But the do rag, it'll protect waves too, because they also need protecting like that, or even a buzz, like a ball fade. It'll make it look crisper like that, so anyone can wear a do rag. But this same blouse, it can look very masculine. It can look almost warlike, or and then also it can look regal because it's like camouflage, but it also has the royal color. So it would look almost like if you had royal royal like I don't mean to be mocking with this, but if you had like rebel fighters that understood themselves as holy, this would actually be appropriate colors that would tap the current of the militancy and also the royal. But then also I could do it more neat, where it would look like a different form of regal, or I can make it look like more like urban, like stylish like that. Or I can wear it where it would look like an actual something that a woman would wear, a man wearing a woman's dress, or somebody that is transcendent of gender. So I'm saying that's how sophisticated your actual appearance, and also then what's viable for you with your appearance, which are the opportunities for life, liberty, private property, existence upon earth, interacting, the real experiences of life, for good and not, is all about a lot about perceptual standing and stature, and also that too bias, which is part of standing and stature. But also the deeper thing I want to say is that's how sophisticated life is. But if you would draw a picture of Jesus Christ, or I'm sorry, the Messiah, that can be that according to the very older Abrahamic books, that could be considered blasphemy to make any approach of drawing. But then that too, what I'm saying is that in the 90s, as I came of age with the internet age, that's when. So there's been different things that can dismiss a person, that are very brutal to say to a person, that make a person not viable just because you would call them that. And a lot of times you don't have evidence, but you say probably. So now you have a weirdo. A weirdo is somebody who is not viable. They probably like the same kinks as everybody. They might have even less experience with kinks, or doing nefarious stuff, or criminal stuff, or boring stuff, or sturdy stuff, or not, or mental health, or not. But for some reason, this one over here is simply a weirdo. Now, in a couple of iterations back, in like the 90s into the 2000s, they would say the same thing as a loser. That would be a loser. I'm a loser, baby, so why don't you kill me? Or like one song that was actually ahead of its time, according to my own format, what I'm saying here is like I'm a creep. So the 90s, you'd have a creep, right? A creep is a little bit different than a weirdo, but not quite the same now, because you could say that the whole world is more of a creep is not actually that significant now, because in the old days, to do creepy stuff, you had to wear a trench. I'm from experience because I was too young, but you'd have to wear a trench coat. You'd have to go, like, the things that you can do online now, because of the convenience of online, you can do any of the same stuff that human beings are interested in with anonymity that won't get you marginalized as a creep in itself. The way you would have to go outside to do something in the past, you'd have to go to a red light district. You have to, heaven forbid, you go trolling, cruising. You'd have to go to a movie, like movie theater that people know what that movie theater is for and why you do stuff like that. So you would be more visible, you by necessity, and that would mean different. A creep combined with, but not necessarily the same as a loser in the 90s. A loser could be a creep. A creep could be a loser, but they could also be different, because a creep could be someone that has means, that has a regular family, but they do this creepy thing over here. Or a loser could be a loser too and do this creepy thing over here. Or a loser could do nothing of the creepy stuff, but they come home to not having they don't have the same standards of materialism. Before jobs, opportunities proliferated, online shopping became cheaper. So the segregation by means of strict economic viability and to a little lesser degree social viability as it had in the 90s at the cusp of the digital age, the end of the very end of the industrial age into the beginning of the digital age, the 80s, circa 80s into 90s, but grading that whole time, but also rapidly and significantly by order of degree, rapidly from the 80s to the 90s. You could say from 1980 to 2000 was by order of degree rapid ascension from industrialism and the education that would be suited by that, what power meant in terms of knowing as an opportunity as gatekeeping would exist under the rigors and the opportunities of industrialism, with the beginning of like typewriters. We had the furthest extent of literacy with the typewriter, personal empowerment with the typewriter, and what could be done for that in terms of authorship and organization, which is you're not really achieving very much according to Umar Johnson unless you're organized. That too with the radio in the late 18th century into radio broadcast, television, silent films, talkie films, television, cable, satellite, military communication probably would transition with that, but then to what gave us the military apparatus, the internet apparatus being conceived in Southeast Asia around the time of what's called the Vietnam War, to then be appropriated and then repurposed towards a more civilian purpose, but I still think as equally militant and sometimes nefarious and genocidal as it would be in an outright military purpose. All that converged right there near about like 80, I would say. Probably one of the transitions, if you had to isolate the transition from the industrial age to the digital age specifically, I think it had to be with music, because music is the thing that made that the 20th century seem different than the 1800s would be the radio. But what would be the most interesting thing to do on the radio would be music. That would probably be the most compelling thing first. That is, you bring this. How wonderful, how amazing is radio? Radio is still kind of amazing. If you turn on a radio, it's like, damn, this thing is actually talking invisible. That's what cell phones are, but it's more stark in a radio. Every time I think you use a cell phone, that crosses your mind, like, how is this thing going that far, that fast? But you probably had, technically to be specific, you probably had like landlines before that. You had like wire communication and like Morse code and stuff like that would be the first long distance. But it's terms of like really changing society from industrialism at all to subsistence living, crop farming, industrial stuff, factory work, stuff like that, to the experience of of entertainment being a value in its own sake, but also probably the leading value that marks the 20th century would be radio at all. And then what was possible for that militarily and then economically also combined with that in tandem. But then just this notion of entertainment upon communication upon invisible radio waves. Then with that, from like the late 1800s all the way until like the I'm saying the most sophisticated thing that we started to do with what would become digital technology outside of a military apparatus, whether or not it came from the military or the state schools funding the military. According to Tashreeq Bey, a lot of your talent at state schools supports the military, and that's where some of your brilliance in the military technology comes from, the actual brilliant minds that would matriculate to schools and then be disabused and of their talent for state-sanctioned purposes and repurpose their contributions for something state-sanctioned and that serves the state. But music would be the most the segue from subsistence living to the industrial age to the digital age now to what we're going on to now, which is AI. The actual the substratum, the ether, the suitable environment, the fertile grounds for all that was actually music, which is also the voice. I'm saying vocation, because what are we doing in life except for expressing our vocation, finding our vocation, enjoying our vocation, suffering for not doing our vocation for anyhow? Is that not a way to describe life? Vocation, voice. It doesn't have to be spoken though. But some of the sophistication about sharing music entertainment on digital waves, but then also what's the word I'm looking for? Your analog like producers. I read this book about songwriting by Paul Zalo. He has a very large book. It's called a tome. There are two tomes of a book by Paul Zalo where he was talking about these different people that gave us the 20th century as music goes. You could say, if you appreciate that book, that Paul Zalo, I started this very channel referencing the Songwriting School of Los Angeles and Rob Seals. I called him the great Rob Seals in my first iteration on here, standing up to music theory, which wasn't against that school, but it's just about it's sharing my testimony as a seeker of music. And that man Rob Seals, when I called him for the first time, calling Cole to that Songwriting School of Los Angeles in like 2018, late before I actually didn't select this class by Galen Whitmore, but he recommended it, and it was a brilliant class that changed my life, because the main thing he had to say in there is that, man, if you're about anything, you say you're about music, cool, but if you're about anything, before you get to have a big old boat, you have to be content with your sailboat. It's gonna start as a sailboat. If it's gonna be your thing, it's better as your thing. He'll be wanting to tell you that. He used to work for like some of these major companies, like I think like some of your main quad record labels, and he would do some of them. I'm not gonna say which one, but it's in his content there. But he would be doing deals with some of the biggest people that have been around for the last 20 years or so, like that. And then also he referenced, if you imagine, I was talking about 2003, 2002 with like The Color Pink and Cameron, but the whole sound of the late 90s, but especially some of the late 90s, but especially the early 2000s, you can that's almost synonymous with the music producer Pharrell. A lot of people were on, it's that a lot of no sustain. Like when you hold a keyboard and a piano is actually it's technically a percussion instrument slash all instruments are actually percussion instruments, and all of life is rhythm. All of life is rhythm, and all sensation is rhythm. So all instruments are actually percussion instruments, but the designation of a piano is that of a string instrument. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, a piano would be worked on by a luthier, as a violin and a guitar would be, if I'm not mistaken, because it's a lot of strings. But when the string, if you live, the strings will ring out like just like a guitar on a piano, dun, 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 without the sustain. But if you put the sustain, it's like a damper, so it's just dun, 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 like beautiful. Dun, 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 dun. I just want you to know, da 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 da. Hey, beautiful. Even when Snoop Dogg was rapping that, if you look at the old Snoop Dogg, it's like the old Gin and Juice. That actually, his voice is more sustained. The old Snoop Dogg, before, I don't think he was with Pharrell back then. I know Pharrell was around since at least the mid to late 90s, and Pharrell might have worked with Aaliyah, if I'm not mistaken, including Timberland. I know Timberland had to do with Aaliyah. Pharrell maybe. But if you look at the old Snoop Dogg, like some of those, like he's like, as I go to, he's like as I my mind hits the sky, I realize my mind starts, my mind hits the sky. Murder was the case that they gave me. His voice is ringing out. My mind hits the sky. Yeah, that's actually what a piano would sound like. But then, if you listen to him in that video where Pharrell was really on top of the world, the world, really, the way that people were appreciating him, it's like I know you're gonna lose it. Hey, pulling up with the pimp fluid. I mean to use that word lightly, but just so someone can know, he's like Snoop Dogg. He's actually talking like dun 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 dun. They're in Rio de Janeiro, but his voice is with that sustain like that. But also the beat's like dun 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 dun. Beautiful. Even when Pharrell saying that, right? He's not saying beautiful. He's like, beautiful. I just want you to know, you're my favorite girl. It was an aesthetic. It was a unique thing. But all I'm saying is that hit all the guitar for all of, as far as I know, if I'm not mistaken, according to Galen Whitmore's statements. I'm sorry, according to So all of the guitar in all of Pharrell's songs, including probably that very song "Beautiful" by Snoop Dogg, dun 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 dun. That's a lot of guitar there. What I my first class in high school, my homeroom of high school was the great Red of his name was just Red of St. Paul, and he my first orientation day before, like 2 weeks before high school, then my first day of high school, then my first class of high school was the actual audio rec room. Audio, there was a lot of analog and Pro Tools back then, as school, and that was just the coolest thing in life to me. That made high school so much cooler, and some of the way that I actually graduated high school was from my success in those first couple years, ninth and 10th grade, and that's because I had something interesting enough to go to high school. If you can imagine when you're in school and you don't have any cool reason, yeah, there might be some pretty people there, but you don't have any reason to go to school. You're pulling up some clothes like they're clean enough to wear, but they're not exactly ironed out. But you're gonna have, and you've been wearing them like at least you're like trying to figure out which clothes don't seem like I forgot to do laundry, but also like I'm not repeating myself too much. You're having those days like that. That class audio record had me going to school like that. But the one thing that class taught me is that if you've ever had training, that's technically training there for audio rec. My homeroom too. What I hear around homeroom here with Red, but then also him being my first inaugural teacher in school, of my first period of high school, ninth grade, is that if you have training in audio, you can hear a song and you can hear through it. You can hear what instruments are playing and you can hear details about that. That's a lot of what it is to be what's called a record producer. But if you listen to that song "Beautiful" by Pharrell, if someone with an audio background at all, to someone, I don't know how it would sound to someone who hasn't played an instrument or done audio, but a song would sound different if you can hear the difference between bass, treble, different instruments, and beats per minute, and the difference between pitch, note, octave, and just a little bit about consonants in the circle of fifths and things like that. That once you get to the circle of fifths, it's not entirely complicated, but you'd have to get through some lessons for that to be intelligible to you. And that would be Western tonal music, which my very first video on this channel is actually standing up to that and saying that is not. I discovered from my classes at Berkeley Online, and also from the works of Victor Wooten, excellent bassist, Grammy-winning bassist, is that is not that works well. That can complement, and that's viable for musical harmony and to make beautiful, great music, enjoyable music. But it's not actually necessary to make viable music. Is the standpoint of this channel. But I can, because of that class, music would sound like less. Like if you imagine like when the first time you heard reggae, like I grew up around reggae. When I first heard reggae as a child, it's beautiful. This is cool. Music is almost a little bit more enjoyable before you would take audio. Like once you take audio, it's more enjoyable as a problem. Like how cool can that sound? How much? Because you're always thinking like a chef at that point. But before that, music is just this beautiful thing. But it's more like it's even more abstract if you don't have like some musical training or practice, like insight into how to practice chops for music is what I'm calling training with it. But listening to that song very simply, I can hear that there's a lot of guitar in that dun 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 dun, dun. Or maybe you could say I'm not thinking of it right now clearly if it's guitar piano, but I know that all of the guitar for all of Pharrell's music in that whole era of his was this man named Brent Paschke. Brent, that's the name of that. I don't mean to dox him with that, but that's actually, if you were to look up the credits as is available, the actual, according to the testimony of himself while visiting a class of Galen Whitmore's at the Songwriting School of Los Angeles that was available on demand in the summer of 2019, is that that he was actually the man himself. He was speaking as the man himself who did all the guitar for all of Pharrell's music. Pharrell and probably, I would imagine maybe Chad Hugo, also the Neptunes. I think right now I didn't mean to do this topical, but I think they're embroiled right now in a little bit of royalty fighting, like about the property, intellectual rights of some of that music with Nerd, No One Ever Really Dies, and then also maybe Neptune, and then some of Pharrell's work, the combination of Chad Hugo and one other person they had. I'm not sure if that person's name was Malice or something like that, but I would imagine actually Brent might actually be involved in that because he did all their guitar, so that would probably pertain to him. But he said that in that class at the songwriting school, he would say that he didn't have whenever he would do stuff like that, like all the cool stuff he did like that, he actually didn't actually think about money a lot because he would have people he trusted in his life handle that for him, and like he would have that all appropriated for him. Like he had professionals handle his life, and all he focused on was music. That might be the actual professional way, the organized way, the responsible way to be a bohemian, because he sounded a lot like a bohemian, like just a free person. Like, hey man, it's cool, man. It's more so about the attitude. I mean, about getting along with people. Because like sometimes I've been in venues and I can think of one song a lot of people, and there's some people that they were kind of mean spirited, and I don't know if they ever did anything after that, because it's it's really about a deal. Because you do something cool for somebody and you might even forgot about what you did, and then they remember that and they compensate you a little bit. It's not a lot, but it's just something cool. You find out it's like, hey, it's kind of nice, man. It kind of means something. I might want to work with that guy again. I might want to make Pharrell poppin' again. Can you imagine somebody talking heavy like that but being cool like that? I might want to make this whole music thing as we're transitioning from the late industrial era to the proper the actual digital age and all the fly stuff. I might, before I would want to do that, I might want to check to see how I feel about that. If somebody been cool about that, said the man Brent Paschke up in the man Galen Whitmore class under the great Rob Seal Songwriting School. That's available to people of humble means, artists of humble means, and has always been so, and would make bargains and deals to make those classes available. Is why I started this channel referencing that. But I was just saying that the transition between all these phases is exactly, I think, the sophistication and the viability commercially and also in technology of music is the seeming transition between these different stages. And in the whole time of the pandemic, right when AI was about to kick off and get realer than real, there would be some beautiful, also another group collective I've engaged with is Unison Audio. They had a lot of material that was that can be used to combine different digital audio workstation, which is what Pro Tools would have been, and some of the what could be done in an analog studio and learned around an analog studio in times past, like all the way back to probably the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then to 90s, and then barely into 2000s would have been analog. And the group Foo Fighters, they share the same drummer as Nirvana. So Nirvana was Kurt Cobain. I forget the taller guy's name. The rhythm. He was a really cool guy too. He was their rhythm. So Kurt Cobain was on lead guitar and lead vocal. Then you had I think you had another very tall statured man. I'm also a pretty tall statured. I stand 6'4". That tall statured man. He was the rhythm guitar, and also he would assist on bass. Then you had their drummer, who was very cool, and he said very little, but you could tell that he went through a lot of changing when Kurt Cobain passed away, because he became the Foo Fighters with another great drummer. He became the guitarist. So I think he went from being the drummer, if I'm not mistaken, of Nirvana to one of the guitarists for the Foo Fighters, and then he had yet another understudy who may have been his better of a drummer, or just for their music it worked better, a very brilliant blonde drummer for Foo Fighters, and then maybe some other people, some other members of Foo Fighters. I don't know a lot about them, but I know that they were using analog pass when digital was in vogue because they like the sound of it. It's considered a very warm and detailed sound, and some of the best quality you can get in music is actually what would have been available on CD quality music of the 90s, and also that too on analog equipment. Both the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist of the 90s was very prominent and viable for music. You could actually say the 90s went bad when, as soon as Pharrell started making a lot of great music, something changed in music. And the only thing I can think of to transition from the 90s and the poppin' is poppin' in the 90s to the poppin' is poppin' in the 2000s, the main difference is Pharrell, who is popping for both of those. But the 90s was I'm not trying to incite any just a debate about that, but I'm just saying that the 90s were so prolific on so many levels for humanity and the arts and the sciences and technology, but especially the arts and music. And it was exactly converged with the CD itself and with analog, which actually suited it, I think. But then that started transitioning into digital. So you can say that maybe Pharrell was one of the first ones to really be playing with some of that digital sound and like doing some of the effects that would have been giving that. I'm not sure if he did like reverb to do that, but at least he did. He probably did do reverb. Like his voice is very interesting. That what he does with his voice, I can cover a lot of music, but it's very some of his vocals are difficult to cover unless you get very like unless you're kind of like you really have to be feeling the music to cover Pharrell. But it might be because he's sending like reverbing his voice, like replicating him, repeating himself in different sophisticated ways to get that kind of cold sound where you sound like kind of like a player like that or like a Mac like that or like just kind of like rock and roll like that. But he's the main difference I can see. That would be the difference between the '90s analog and then the 2000s. And then with that, you had the group Hypnotized Minds from Memphis, where I was at that time, 2002. They had their own style in the '90s. That if you listen to their music in the '90s, you can appreciate that it really was ahead of its time. And I always thought that listening to them, because I listened to them since 2002 when I went to high school there until the present day. But the Game Spitter, the YouTuber, he said in one of his videos that he pointed out that they were ahead of their time, and they exactly were. So you had all of the great music of the '90s. Then you had Pharrell and his sound that really proliferated a lot of music in the early 2000s, and then a lot of culture and real human lived experience that would have been happening with that music. But then also, I said would have been happening, like I wasn't privy to it. But then also you had the group Hypnotized Mind that would combine with the Houston sound. You had like DJ Screw, I think, was from Houston, and he would have influenced Little Flip. But Little Flip would be present on the Hypnotized album, Most Known Unknowns, that has a lot of the whole Hypnotized. They're very talented lyrically, very very talented. They were the counterpart, and there's an actual long-standing low-key rivalry between musically between Memphis and Cleveland. A lot of people wouldn't be able to appreciate what Memphis has anything to do with Cleveland. Is that both Bone Thugs and Harmony and Hypnotized Mind, they made overt references to Satanism in their music, and they were very sophisticated musically, and they blended first with Bone Thugs and Harmony. They were very sophisticated musically, and they blended harmony with street lifestyles, and they had redeeming messages in there, but they also had very corrupting they had ostensibly on the face of it outright wicked messaging, and also ostensibly on the face of it outright redeeming music and healing music both, because they have songs like why do I stay high, why do I stay high, or it's the first of the month, wake up, wake up, wake up. I heard that in the '90s, where I would be growing up around free lunch in the student family housing of University of New Mexico, and that's what my life was for. It was to wake up and go eat free lunch on the grass with blankets on the grass around the park like that, around the basketball court in the middle of the day like that. So I could relate to that song as a child, but then also some of their undertones of and I would listen to a lot of Bone Thugs and Harmony as a very young child, like third grade. And then they had and then they have songs like they were with Eazy-E too, he was a lot of responsible for all of what a lot of hip hop has been proliferating, and the renegade attitude of hip hop has a lot to do with Eazy-E. But then after he passed away, and while he's passing away, he kind of handed that over the helm of hip hop for a time, not as long as some other iterations, but for a time, Bone Thugs and Harmony really had that. And they would be popular on MTV, later BET, and then also this channel called The Box, where anyone could call in and listen to anything they want, and the Bone would proliferate with that. And then you can tell from the '90s when I just say Bone, like people know the other part of that, Bone Thugs and Harmony. But then they'd have songs like it's the thuggish rugged Bone, but that's a deeper thing that reveals some of the history in that some of these organizations, like I was referencing that some things that we call the street or street organizations. The mode that they operate is it's called recrudescence because it's always been around, but it's also reminiscent of other iterations of where opportunities were and weren't. But that the street organizations, right? I'm not gonna reference the names of them out of my mouth because they're still very potent, and people have lived, died, and suffered and sacrificed about those names. But what they started at sometimes were in the United, according to Dr. Wesley Muhammad. In the United States in the 1960s, you had some political activity that's not well documented, but it was well felt at the time. So you're presented that you had the flower generation, you had hippie type activity, bohemian activity, that people would mock hippies now, but that most things have an antithesis and a balance. So at the same time as you're having and about to have outright outcry about like people of the status quo being conscripted to military because they were demanded. There was a necessity by the implications of the calculus of that fighting, that they would need to have enlisted ranks, but also officers, and they would need to draw from some of the well-to-do and the landed wealth classes of people to do that. So the dynamics of that, the cleverness of the tactics and what was viable for tactics in Southeast Asia, what that forced the United States Western forces to respond with, forced the conscription of different people that would otherwise be away from some of the duties of the poor people. But then even in that conflict, I would imagine that the poor people, and it's been cited that the poor people, there's always a difference in how duties are passed around and how suffering is meted out. So whatever, according to Jason Black, whatever is the trending, according to Dr. Umar Johnson, whatever the society is going through, right? Whether that be slavery, sharecropping, working in factories, working long days, military, digitalism, consumerism, now AI, now inflation, now anything you can name, recession. Whoever's at the bottom of whoever's at the most marginal person, they get the heaviest load, they get the worst of it. So in that Southeast Asia, the poor people would have been getting the worst of that too. But I was referencing that for a reason, is that I a little bit lost that train of thought, but but the organizations that you have now, right? Like, so now you have social media now, right? So like I can come on social media and I can say anything, but if I reference certain history or certain organizations, street and or not, I could get called to task. That you recently, within the last week, you've had females be executed publicly, rapidly, anonymously for referencing a street organization. But the reason I say that is because according to Dr. Wesley Muhammad, in the late 60s and 70s, you had a lot in cities like Detroit, Chicago, a lot of like what you'd call chocolate cities. There was a lot of standing up to the status quo, where you had a near revolution. So a lot of these street organizations, according to Dr. Wesley Muhammad, and also a book about modern human civil rights, they started out as standing up for your neighborhood. And that's a very human thing. That's reminiscent of actually the Italian Cosa Nostra families. Back in the day, you didn't get human populations. You've always had like a state, right? Like the state demands duties, taxes, stuff like that. That's where the state sets the stage for transactions to happen, sanctioned transactions. But you always have a declared power and a de facto power, that balance. The state is the declared de facto power. The declared power. The de facto is both the state as it really exists and the counter state, because the state is arbitrary, it's man-made, man-run. So for life to exist, you have to have an actual a counterweight, a countermeasure to make existence happen, and that's what would be called the street now.